I always thought I'd go far away on mission. I really did. I really thought my calling would be international, and I never in a million years thought that the Lord would ask me to walk outside of my door in the mission field where I live and get to know my neighbors. I'm Kristen Schell, and I live in Austin, Texas. I am a wife and a mother of 4 children. Any given day, I am in the kitchen or in the minivan. I am active in the kids' school. I'm a writer, and I volunteer at church. We've been in this neighborhood almost 10 years. I always knew we were supposed to love our neighbors because it's the Great Commandment. But how you live that out day to day is hard, especially when you don't know your neighbors, which is the situation I was in. I did not know my neighbors. Sure, I knew, a handful of them. And so there was this huge question, what do you want me to do, Lord? Here I am, Lord. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to walk across the street and bang on doors? Do you want me to take cookies? What do you want me to do, Lord? God answers prayers in really winsome ways. I was hosting a party with a friend in our backyard, and I didn't have any tables. And so I ordered a picnic table from Lowe's. And when it arrived 2 days later, I knew that for the purposes of the party, I was going to have it in my backyard. But as soon as that party was over, I was moving that table in the front yard, and it was going to be a gathering place. And so I painted it turquoise, which is my favorite color. And I did. I put it outside underneath a tree in the front yard. It was awkward at first. I have this table, it's bright turquoise, it's sitting in the front yard, and now I'm like, well, now what do I do? So I took a whole bunch of stuff out with me. I took my phone and my journal and my computer, and I even, I had some art stuff that I was working on because, I needed to look like I was just doing something. By going out front, I was saying to God, here I am, Lord, your will be done. Go before, behind, and beside me into the neighborhood. And that very day, life changed, and I met a neighbor within 3 hours of putting a table out in my front yard. A lot has happened since putting the table out there. There are a handful of women who are now very close friends who I did not know. It has become kind of a gathering place.
I'm Bob. This is my daughter, Peggy.
So one of the best things is just the sense of normal community, everyday life. The neighborhood kids come over. They'll do homework when the weather's pretty. We've had lemonade stands, hot cocoa stands. More intimately, it's a place where I can meet and have met neighbors who now pop by with coffee, and just for 15 minutes, a conversation over coffee that wouldn't have happened. The Lord has taught me, and I am learning to be present. That it sounds like it should be a no-brainer, but listening is not a skill that came naturally at first to me, nor was being present.
This was really fun. It was great to see you here.
Loving my neighbors has taught me how to love God better. It's drawn me into deeper relationship with Him. You don't need permission or a program to go outside and be who Christ has called you to be. When we open up our front door, and we take 3 steps right out our front yard, good things happen. Open up your door and let God do the rest.
It's been. What a remarkable time. It was truly epic. And you guys know we spell epic, E-P-O-C-H, which is a significant point in time that marks radical change. And so this was a time that we look back on in many of our lives. We take a look at what Epic Weekend has meant, the family camp, the family weekend that we draw near together. And it has been a remarkable time for 5 years now. This is our 5th time to do this. And it has been absolutely remarkable. The cool thing is that as we sit here tonight, Some of us really would like to sit back and kind of rest on our laurels now because we've had a great weekend. We've kind of done our due diligence. But here's the thing, no rest for the weary. Because we plunge continuing on into loving where we live. Because epic weekend equals family. And family equals home. Home equals family on mission. Specifically to our neighbors. So we are called now that allow this moment in time to be a radical change, not only in our homes, for our homes, but through our homes with the people who are near to us. And so you see this example here. What a great example it is. And that it's going to look very different for various of you. Some of you guys have been living this for 5 years now. Some of you even longer than that. Some of you it's been about a year. Some of you it's been about a week. Wherever you are, we take steps forward into tonight, thinking about how we live this out in a tangible way, and we leverage the momentum of a wonderful weekend for God's purposes, for His kingdom. And so we launch with night number 2 tonight. Let me remind you, our series Key Passages is our mission as a church. Love God, love people. It's found in Luke 10:27. We find it at the kind of in the middle of the story of the Good Samaritan. It says this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So here's a question. Did anybody get to fill in another block on your block map this last week? Anybody get to know a new neighbor this last week? Did anybody realize this last week the pleasant surprise that you now know more neighbors this time filling that out as you knew last time filling that out? Anybody? We had a great time in our legacy group this last week talking about the progress that we've seen. Talking about seeing how the Lord is opening us up, and we're actually, some in our group are now waving at their neighbors rather than like tunnel vision, right? And it's wonderful because it's all in process, right? We're all in progress. And I will tell you, that same person has a huge lofty goal for the eventual goal. It's just taking some time for God to work that out in their lives. It's a really beautiful thing. But really across the board, it was a beautiful expression of how God has been at work. And so the thing is that it's not a matter of perfection. It's a matter of being on mission. It's a matter of progress. And so we want to make sure that we're always taking steps forward. Here's the thing though. There's a major obstacle that typically comes in the way of us developing relationships with our neighbors. And here it is, the biggest obstacle. The biggest obstacle to taking the Great Commandment seriously is time. Man, we run a pace that is so fast. It is so fast. And we have to remember that in order for the Great Commandment to work, it requires time. And if we're not giving that time, then we are sabotaging the mission. One of the greatest stories that shows us this example is found in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. It's the story of Mary and Martha. You got Jesus who's showing up. They're on their way. Jesus comes to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, taking time out. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. And the Lord looks at her and says, Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things. But few things are needed, or indeed only one, really. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. How many of you in this room are Marthas? Yeah, I'm a Martha, as a Danny. I am. I can get so focused on the little things that really matter this much, and lose sight of what matters most so easily. Any of you guys used to be a Martha? You're a recovering Martha on your way to being a Mary? Come on, all you burly men in this room. Be a Mary. You know what I'm saying? man, progress, right? We want to be making our way that way. See, Martha is so busy that she misses out on what matters most. The thing that is most important. And guys, what's wild is those of us who struggle with our busyness, our dilemma is actually much, much bigger than a shortage of time. It's a problem of priorities. It's when our priorities get out of whack. We tend to let the urgent things crowd out the important things. And so we have to ask the question, are we missing the main thing? Are we sometimes, I don't want to say all the time, but sometimes, are we missing the main thing because we are busy with other good things? Because see, I think everybody in this room, I think you guys are doing your dadgum best to do what is right, to do what is good, to do what is pleasing to the Lord. I think we're trying to do as much good as we possibly can to make a dent in this world and be good news to everybody we come in contact with. We want to help people. We want to do this kind of thing. How many of you guys run yourself in the ground helping people? Yeah. We're guilty of that. We can say yes, 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 and the next thing we know, we're like, I don't ever want to do anything for anybody ever again. It's so easy to get there, isn't it? And it seems like these things are so urgent. If we don't help them, nobody else will. And we turn ourselves into Jesus sometimes, when we really need to let Jesus be Jesus. And let us just be us, and let Him flow through us. The urgent things don't need to take priority whenever we miss the main thing in the process. You see, this text here, the story of Mary and Martha, it's the one that, if you'll notice, comes right after the story of the Good Samaritan. And Jesus is setting a tone here. He's setting a theme for us. And it's so important to see that we must take the first part of the Great Commandment seriously. To love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, with all of our mind. We've got to take that so seriously and make sure that that is priority number one. To make sure we're spending time at the feet of Jesus, at the foot of the cross, in God the Father's lap, as our dad, caring for us and loving for us. We've got to take that so seriously. And then we've also got to have that tangible expression of Jesus flowing through us to the people that we're near to. The people quite literally that live right next door or right across the street or catty corner to us. We love them as we love ourselves. And so guys, one thing that's hard is the discernment to know when to say no to the good things so that you can say yes to the best things. Is that not the hardest thing ever? Because how do you know? The only way we know is by trying. And sometimes we're going to say no to something that really mattered. But we cannot live with the fear that we're going to fail and somehow mess somebody else's life up. God is much bigger than we are. Jesus is the Savior, not us. And so if we go overboard and we say no too much, please understand Jesus is going to rescue us and the people. He's going to rescue. He's bigger than us. We want to say yes as often as we can, but we must know how to say no. And we're going to have to ask the Holy Spirit to let us know when we say no. Are we just being lazy? Or is it right to say no so that we can live a balanced life that God has called us to? It only comes with practice. And we have to make sure that we're giving it a shot so that we're tuning our ear to listen to the Lord. Tell us what matters most versus what matters little. Or what matters better than the very good thing that matters also. It's not saying the good things don't matter. But it is saying there is a purpose for your life that is specific to you that God longs for you to fulfill. And you can't fulfill someone else's purpose because you're afraid that they might fall short. You're called to your purpose. It's time for us to fulfill that. God's got this plan that He set in motion a long time ago for you and me. But we have to listen to His ear, or we have to have our ear listening to His voice in order to be able to discern the good from the best. so we can keep the main thing the main thing. Here's the deal though, guys. In the midst of our crazy lives, it's so important that when we look at our neighbors, I know not a raise of hands, but how many of you guys have ever found yourself saying, I don't really have time to get to know my neighbors. I'm working 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. Whenever I'm not working, I'm spending time with my family. Whenever I'm not spending time with my family, then I'm trying to do these extracurricular activities. And I've got all these things. I've got a sick mother or a sick father, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And I don't have time because I'm working at the church too much. I'm serving. I'm volunteering all of my time at the church, and I just don't have time to get to know my neighbors. You ever found yourself in that pattern before? Or maybe you found yourself pattern, you know what, I don't think my neighbors really want to know me because I never see them. It's like they don't exist, but I know there's cars in the driveway and then there's not. And then there's cars back in the driveway and then there's not. So unless the car has learned how to have autopilot or something like that, there's got to be people living in the neighborhood. But perhaps maybe they don't want to know you, you may think, because it just feels that way sometimes. Guys, when we say things like, I don't have time to get to know my neighbor, what we're really saying is I don't consider getting to know my neighbor as important as everything else I do. And it's important for us to wrap our minds around that, to see how God has placed us where we live, as we talked about last week, intentionally, in order to allow the gospel message to flow through us to the people who live literally next door to us, across the street to us. And it matters just as much. It matters just as much as everything else that we're doing. And so we live in this tension between the urgent and the important. There's a very important tension here. The urgent and the important. And when our priorities are determined by the urgent, our lives will not match up with our intentions and our values. When the urgent is the thing that takes priority, it doesn't match up with our values as Christ followers, with our intentions as Christ followers. Because the urgent will always trump if we're not careful. It'll always be the trump card. I know a great example for me is, the pace of life that we live as a family. It's a fairly fast-paced family life. And so one of the things I love to do is mow my yard. I love to mow my yard. Sometimes you can't tell that when you drive by my house, but I love going out there and mowing my yard. I love watering my yard. I love mowing it. I love all this kind of, it to be green. I like all that kind of stuff. But it never fails. I have one neighbor that every time I get out there to mow my yard, it feels like every time. It's totally not every time. But selfishly, it feels like every time I walk out there to mow my yard, usually the pace of that day goes, I love mowing my yard, but I've really got to get this thing knocked out in about 42 minutes. Roughly. 42 minutes or so. No, it's not that bad. But I really need to get this thing knocked out and then get back inside the house and do whatever we need to do because we're going to be doing something else next in the day. But every time I walk out there, I'll get about halfway through the first half of my front yard and my neighbor will walk down and I'll see him coming. I'm like, maybe he's just going to walk on past this time. But you know what? He doesn't. He stops. He's like this, and I'm like, you let go of the little bar and it, I'm like, dang. Those of you who are my neighbors that are in this room are never going to do this anymore, are you? Hey, don't worry. I'll stop every time for you. Don't worry. No. But you know what, in the grand scheme of life, who cares about a dead young yard? You know what I'm saying? Who cares about the grass? What difference does that make in the grand scheme of eternity? My neighbor doesn't know Jesus. How can that bother? Because the urgent sometimes trumps the main thing. I'm sad to say it. Now we can laugh about it, and we have to laugh at ourselves, otherwise we'll cry, won't we? And so we laugh at ourselves. But this is one of my flaws. That's one of mine, where the urgent has trumped. And I know you guys have examples of your own whenever that happens. But Jesus gives us a beautiful example of how to live life with the interruptions. Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 15 is the passage, but I'm only going to start in verse 5. Jesus, while he's traveling from town to town, and in verse 5 it says this, a farmer went out to sow his seed. He was scattering the seed. Some fell along the path, it was trampled on, and the birds ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, and when it came up, the plants withered because they had no moisture. Other seeds fell among thorns, which grew up and choked out the plants. And still other seed fell on good soil. It came up and yielded a crop 100 times more than was sown. Now guys, you know this is a story. Jesus was a master storyteller. He did a beautiful job. This is called the parable of the sower. Parable is just a fancy word for story. It's a story of the sower. And in this story, there's an important soil that we need to point out. It's the third soil. The third soil didn't produce because it was choked out by the weeds. Now, the story behind the story here, the truth behind what we read is that this soil, the third soil, is a picture of those who hear the gospel message, but as they go on their way, the message is choked and dies because of life's worries, life's riches, and life's pleasures. Those are the things, the urgent things that choke out the main thing. See, Jesus, man, please don't think that Jesus didn't get a lot done. When he walked this earth, he got a ton done. He was an amazingly efficient man. But his life was not feverish. It was not this hectic, crazy, out of control paced life. It was calculated, and it was balanced. It was very full. But in the midst of all that he was getting done, he never, ever, ever was too busy for a conversation. He always had time for people and conversation. You remember Zacchaeus? Oh, don't you love this story? Wee little man. It makes us feel big and everything, right? It's awesome because you can imagine Zacchaeus. He had to have been like 4'2", you know? 5 feet tall, maybe. I don't know. Zacchaeus, he climbs up in a tree in order to see Jesus. This man that he had heard about. He's a tax collector. You know, Zacchaeus was. Zacchaeus was this tax collector. He was nasty. He was horrible, whatever. He climbs up in a tree because he wanted to know what this guy Jesus was all about. Jesus is walking along the road and he looks up and he calls him by name, Zacchaeus. Now that would freak you plumb out, would it not? Zacchaeus, hey, come on down here. You don't have to look at me from afar because I'm going to go to your house and we're going to share a meal together. Always had time for a conversation. Always took time. There's another story of Jesus walking along the road and there's this woman who had been bleeding for a long time. You know what I'm talking about. She's having terrible woman things. And she was, I can't imagine what was going through her mind, what was going through her heart, her emotional state, all of those things. She was hurting. And she had been hearing the stories of Jesus. And so she runs to the parade where Jesus was coming down the street. And she's chasing after Jesus. And she just thinks, if I could just touch him. If I could just touch him, maybe I can be healed. And Jesus, among all of the people that are along the road, she touches the hem of his cloak. And Jesus turns around, stops what he's doing, and says, who touched my cloak? Of course, his followers are thinking, hello, there's all these people around. How in the world are we going to determine who touched your cloak? Hello, come on. She comes forward and she says, it was me. And what does Jesus say to her? Your faith has healed you. But it took time to turn around and talk. Always had time for a conversation. He lived a very full life, but always had time for a conversation. Jesus kept a pace of life in which he had time for the interruptions. We just have to ask ourselves, as Christ's followers, can the same be true of us? Do we always have time for an interruption? Do we make time for the interruptions when they come? Or are we living at a pace that allows us to be interruptible? Are we allowing our lives to be interruptible? Or do we live at a pace in which that can't happen? And when it does, we have to brush people off and move on. So the question we have now is, what would it take to change the pace of our lives in order to be more available to those who live around us? Tonight I brought some rocks with me. And this box rocks. You know, it's a box of rocks, right? And it's so good. But I also got some sand in here. And so, when we think of our lives, we've got some things that tend to occupy our time. We've got some little things that tend to occupy our time, right? We've got things like email, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. What else? What are the small things that tend to occupy our time?
College football.
Bachelor. That is definitely a small thing that occupies our time. If I had a nickel for every time I've watched that, I wouldn't have any. So, no, I think I have like a half of an episode. So anyway, no. So what else? What are some of the other small things that tend to occupy our time? What are they?
Baylor football.
Say again? School. I heard a teenager. School. We'll give you a little school here. Okay, there you go. What are the other small things? Y'all yell them out.
Baylor football.
Baylor football is this. I'm just kidding. It's not. Now, the small things that occupy our time. Cooking a meal. That's a good one. Grocery shopping. Oh my goodness.
Walmart.
How about soccer practice? Netflix. What else? What are the small? We got a ton of small things. What are they? Video games. What was that? Texting, but not texting and driving. Voice text only. What else? Anything? Just talking on the phone, sure. Man, there's so many of these things, aren't there? Facebook, yeah. So many of these small things that tend to occupy our time, right? What's crazy is whenever the urgent things become the most important to us, the things that we take priority to do, we start there. What happens is whenever we get to the big things, which are spending time with the Lord, right? It's a big deal. Spending time with the Lord. Spending time with our family. Okay? Like at dinner. Taking a dinner time in order to spend time together. What are some other big things we do? Spending time developing a relationship with your neighbors. Well done, young lady. Good job. Yeah, family. How about spouses? Yeah, going on date nights with your spouse. Those kinds of things. Well, what ends up happening is we've got these big things that matter that end up not being able to be done because we just don't have time. And so really, it's very simple. The illustration is simple because all we have to do is swap around the priority. And when we begin our morning spending time on YouVersion with the Lord, that's the most important thing, spending time with the Lord. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And then we spend some time with our number two, our spouse. Then we spend some time with our children, perhaps around the dinner table, enjoying time maybe on some one-on-ones with our children. We spend some time developing relationships with our neighbors. Being interrupted while we mow the grass.
Yeah.
And we spend some time.
Baylor football.
Everybody's a comedian. Then we spend time with the things that matter most. What's crazy is when we start with that. You guys know what I'm doing? All these other little things. It's not the things that we can't do. It's just then all the other things tend to get done too. With time left to spare. Guys, this is God's economy. This is our economy. We keep the main thing the main thing. We live a life that is much more strategic and much more on purpose. Psalm 90, verse 12 says, "Teach me to number my days, that we might gain a heart of wisdom." This is a great text on priorities. Teach me to number my days, which means let me be intentional. Let me be purposeful. Let me be strategic in how I live out my days that I have on this earth. How I live out the 84,000 seconds we get in a day. How we utilize that and how we give that to the Lord and we leverage that for His purposes, not just our own purposes. That we might gain a heart of wisdom, so that when our heart is full of wisdom, guess what comes out of our mouths? The fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. Teach me to number my days, that we might gain a heart of wisdom. See, throughout the New Testament, we know Jesus lives His life in a specific rhythm. And one of the big rocks that we need to make sure that we're doing, that very few of us do well, is called rest. Jesus was the master at being amazingly efficient, amazingly full schedule, take time for conversations, but also was the master at stealing off some time alone and getting some rest, so that He was caring for people out of what He had rather than what He didn't have. And so He was able to do a much, much better job. And so everybody, please slow down this week. Let's do our best to ask God, what does it mean? What would that look like in our lives to flip things upside down and begin with the big things? What do we need to reprioritize? What do we need to kind of say no to so that we can get some other things done first, and then we can say yes to all those other things that are icing on the cake things? What does life look like for that? And so the challenge this week, really specifically, I know that there's a lot of things that this applies to, but specifically for the purpose of what we're talking about tonight, this week, one of the big rocks we want to do is to spend at least 1 hour in your front yard. Spend at least 1 hour, just 1 hour in your front yard. If you don't have a front yard, you live in an apartment complex, live 1 hour in a common place where people kind of come by, so that you can speak to them when they come by. Just spend 1 hour and see what happens. Ask God, say, I'm going to give you this hour, Lord. Do with this hour what you see fit. And then just spend that time out there. Maybe if you're feeling like an overachiever, take a walk in your neighborhood. People that are out, just say hi. Just begin talking to them. And say hi. Introduce yourself to them. And then if you already know people, it's time to take the next step. Find something out about them that you don't already know. Find out where they work. Find out what they do for fun. Find out all these things that you may not know. Just give an hour this week to that. 1 hour. That's it. Here's my prayer for all of us this week. God, give me the courage and the desire to make time to take the next step with those that are closest to me. God, give me the courage and the desire to make time to take the next step with those who are closest to me. Y'all pray with me. And Lord, it's good to be challenged. It's good to see your face at such an obvious level. Lord, I pray that tonight when we think of our neighbors, Lord, let that be one of the big rocks in our lives. Let that be something that is significant. And Lord, I pray that all the urgent things that seem to come up, the money stuff and the work stuff and the transporting kids here and there stuff and all of that, Lord, we pray that you help us to say no to the things that don't matter most, so that we can say yes to the things that do. Lord, let us this week tune our ears to you. And Lord, as we draw near to our families, and Lord, we put an exclamation point on this weekend. And Lord, what we do now is we live this out on mission. We live this out in a way that honors you with our lives. And we live this out in a way that honors our neighbors as well. Lord, we pray for you to do big things. Let us take the time and not allow the enemy to fill our schedules and make us too busy. Lord, we need you. We need you to save us. We pray these things in the name of Jesus.